Welcome to Art of Conflict Transformation Speaker Series by Peace 360 Initiative. Through this program, our goal is to create awareness and provide education to the public on conflict resolution. We see the problem in our world: increase of discrimination, hate, racism, injustice, and violence. People are divided, divisive, and hopeless. They need help finding solutions. Everyone deserves healing and transformation. This is our world. These are our people. We need to act. Peace 360 Initiative's vision is to foresee healthy individuals and peaceful communities in the US and around the world. Our conflict transformation programs goals are creating awareness and educating the public, providing trainings to the schools, workplaces, and community organizations, help creating community groups to achieve reconciliation and coexistence. We want to see happy families, safe schools, successful workplaces, and non-violent communities. We believe conflict is inevitable, but the ability to handle the conflict makes a difference and brings peace to all. Peace work is a teamwork. If we come and work together, peace is possible in our world. Join with us to make a difference. Peace 360 Initiative for all.
Peace 360 Initiatives panel discussion series. So this is the first of panel of the series in the conflict resolution series. So thank you, our panelists, for taking time to be a part of this discussion. And now let me introduce our panelists. And I'm going with the ladies first. So I'll introduce Dr. Brittany Falls. Dr. Brittany Falls is a faculty member of the Department of Conflict Analysis and Dispute Resolution at Salisbury University. She teaches international law and various UN courses with the Salisbury University Department of Political Science and the Honors College. In addition, she has been awarded an Honors College Faculty Fellowship. She serves as the faculty advisor for Salisbury University's Model UN, the UN Millennium Fellowship, and the UN Association Chapter. At the university, Dr. Fowles is a Fulton School of Liberal Arts remote teaching specialist. She's also a senior research fellow and trained mediator at Bosman Center for Conflict Resolution in Salisbury, Maryland. And her research interests include international law, transitional justice, international criminal code, and human rights and the rule of law. Her dissertation addresses how the implementation and use of reparation mechanisms affect the satisfaction of child soldier and sexual violence victims of the International Criminal Court. Dr. Fowles is the co-director of Salisbury Regional Center of Expertise, a location acknowledged by the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and UN University. This UN location focuses on conflict prevention and creative problem solving. Dr. Fowles has been elected to be on the UN America's Governance Committee and UN America's Strategic Planning Support Committee. and leader of the UN America's Task Force on Education. She serves as a formal consultant for UN Human Rights Council's working group on the use of mercenaries, the UN Regional Center of Expertise Global Network, and the US Institute of Peace Africa program. And she has fluency in 6 languages and has received over $1 million in grants. And her list of achievements is a long, and due to time's sake, I am stopping here. And thank you and welcome, Dr. Fouts. Thank you for being a part of this panel. And now I move on to Dr. Jared O. Bell. Welcome, Dr. Bell. Dr. Bell is a post-conflict development expert with technical focus on justice, human rights, and reconciliation. He holds a bachelor's degree from Duquesne University in International Relations, a Master of Science from the University of Baltimore in Negotiation and Conflict Management, and a PhD from Nova Southeastern University in Conflict Analysis and Resolution, with a focus in international peace and conflict. Dr. Bell is currently based in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, where he works in US Aid's mission to Bosnia, Bosnia's Democracy Office, where he serves as a democracy and governance advisor. He has also worked on various human rights, peace building and development projects with a variety of organizations such as Peace Direct, the UN Development Program, the UN Human Rights Council, as well as the American Red Cross and the Maryland Office of Refugees and Asylees. Dr. Bell has also taught, presented, and lectured across the globe in such places as Bosnia and Herzegovina, Latvia, UK, France, Poland, the Gambia, as well as the United States. A prolific writer, Dr. Bell has published numerous articles on human rights, transitional, reconciliation, and peace building, and he's the author of the book, Frozen Justice, Lessons from Bosnia and Herzegovina's Failed Transitional Justice Strategy, published with Vernon Press in 2018. In addition to his formal education, Dr. Bell has also studied and received professional training at the University of Leiden's Grotius Center for International Legal Studies Summer School for Human Rights and Transitional Justice, the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies, the European Inter-University Center for Human Rights and Democratization's Venice Academy of Human Rights. Thank you, Dr. Bell, and welcome to Peace 360's panel discussion. Now I'll move on to Dr. Evan Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman holds a PhD in political science from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. Dr. Hoffman has published numerous articles on the themes of conflict prevention and resolution, peace building, and mediation. He has provided consulting services to Global Affairs Canada, the Carter Center, the UN, the European Union, the Ottawa Police Service, St. Lawrence College, the Vietnamese Ministry of Justice, and others. Over the last 15 years, Dr. Hoffman has conducted workshops and trainings with hundreds of community leaders, university students, police officers, and government officials from around the world. His books include The Mediator's Handbook for Durable Peace, and it was published by Cyan in 2010, and International Mediation in a Fragile World, co-edited with David Carment. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman, and welcome to the panel discussion. And now, Dr. John Mark Akatpo. Dr. John Mark is African-European born and raised, and he's European and American educated. And Dr. John Mark has a doctorate in political science and in international conflict management, peace building, and development. He's a professor at Kennesaw State University. He's also human rights and international affairs professional, and has a master's degree in public international law, international relations, and political science. And he has published articles on European Union climate policies, economic development in Africa, and water scarcity and conflict on the Nile River. Dr. John Mark is a representative at internationallawyers.org and at the UN's, and a member of the Roundtable on Peace and Health, Mali, at the Carter Center. Dr. John Mark has experience working as a consultant for several UN Development Program projects. He also worked for the European Union on the Technical Assistance Program for communication and information on environmental protection in West Africa. In 2018, he spent a summer working with the local government in Durban, South Africa. In 2019, he was appointed as an external scholar to the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Accra, Ghana. While in Durban and Accra, Dr. John Mark taught courses on the impact of international financial organizations and international conflict resolution theories. Dr. John Mark is certified with the Alternatives to Violence Project, USA. He speaks several languages, including French, German, EU, and English. I mean, I'm not sure how to pronounce EWE, but I'm sorry if I messed up, Dr. John Mark. I welcome you all. Thank you for being here. And let us start our panel discussion. So before we start, let me remind the audience of some housekeeping rules. So please do not unmute yourself. If you have any questions for our panelists, please type it in the chat. Thank you. So now let me take this opportunity to share a quote that is relevant to this topic. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. It was by Ronald Reagan, our former president. And it's so true that when we are working with people with diverse backgrounds, cultures, and communities who might not share the same interests and cultures and beliefs with us, there is some degree of conflict, and conflicts are inevitable. But the true peace is not possible. So what is possible is how to manage that conflict. So managed conflict is practical. And that's what we are looking for in this panel discussion. So let me share the goals for this panel discussion. The goal for the next hour or hour and a half is to learn and improve our understanding on how to resolve conflicts between groups and communities. The idea behind this panel discussion is to focus on bringing peace and reconciliation in the local communities by following the key insights shared by our distinguished speakers. Our panelists have years of experience researching and practicing conflict resolution and analysis. So I'm sure we all can learn some productive ways to build caring communities. Now, that being said, I would like to start this panel discussion. So before we leave the floor open to our esteemed panelists, I'm sure we all have, at least I have this question. I have some understanding of conflict management and conflict resolution, but I have very little to no understanding of what conflict transformation is. So my question to our esteemed panelists is going to be, how is conflict transformation different from conflict resolution, and if they can share some examples? So let's hear from our panelists. We'll start with Dr. Bell. Welcome, Dr. Bell.
Anju, I believe he may have been bounced out of the session.
Okay, so why don't we start with Dr. Hoffman?
Okay, thank you. Thank you to Anju and Chris and the Peace 360 Initiative for putting this event together. It's an honor to be here with these esteemed panelists, and thank you for a challenging question to start us off today. So, as you know, different academics, different researchers, some of these key terms in the field, they view them differently. And so this is my own personal take on what is conflict transformation. And it's a word that, as you start to look into some of the literature in this field, you'll see it used in different ways. So my own conceptualization of this is that conflict resolution I view as more of a shorter term, taking care of an immediate issue that has arisen. And so often conflict resolution involves a mediation to discuss that issue, or some kind of facilitated dialogue, or maybe no outside third party, and maybe the two parties in conflict negotiate directly with each other. Which is fine, and it's great to talk about that issue and to resolve it and put it away, and we've moved past that. The concern is that there could be deeper underlying factors that have given rise to that conflict in the first place that are maybe not addressed through the conflict resolution process. And so for me then, conflict transformation is taking a bigger step back. It's looking at the whole context, the whole scenario, and saying, what is it that created this conflict in the first place? And how can we address those kind of root causes? Because the conflict resolution process may end that immediate conflict issue, but if the root causes haven't been addressed, then of course another issue may come up in 3 months or 6 months or a year down the road. So let me give you a real life example. I'll tell you a little story here to help illustrate this. There was a company that was hiring a new president for their company, and they kind of rushed. There was an immediate need to fill that position, so they rushed through the hiring process, and they didn't really pick the best candidate. And when that candidate came in, it polarized the workplace into a kind of us and them. Some people supported the new president and some people didn't. That president then eventually became fired, and there were some contentious issues around some of his behaviors. And then the workplace said, well, we have to hold a mediation to bring the two sides together. And so they held that mediation, and that helped to address the issue of the hiring and firing of this particular person. However, what assurance do they have that the next president won't also be chosen through a flawed process and also be a very polarizing figure who's going to divide the workplace? So in order to transform that conflict, you'd have to go back and have a discussion about what was our hiring process. Did we have a policy in place? Should we have formed a committee? Should we have had a vote, a democratic vote? Should we have used a consensus so everybody gets a say? So you're going back, looking at the procedures and the policies and the mechanisms for hiring presidents, so that for future, you're basically preventing those conflicts from coming up in the future because you've transformed the nature of the conflict. So I think I've taken up enough time, and so I'll pass the floor on to somebody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. And what I learned from the difference between conflict resolution and transformation is that conflict resolution focuses on the symptoms or the short term, and the transformation is focusing on the root cause or what is causing those symptoms. And now with that, I'll go to Dr. Bell. Dr. Bell, if you could give us some more examples and insight into what's the difference between conflict resolution and conflict transformation. Thank you. If Dr. Bell is not able to unmute himself, can someone else, Dr. Fowles, Dr. John Mark, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah. Dr. Ford, do you want to go first?
Sorry,
You
I'm
go
here. I'm
first.
just having some technical
All right.
difficulties. Sorry.
Okay.
You can go
You can go
first,
ahead.
John Mark.
Oh, okay. So I think Dr. Hoffman actually give examples and the definition, but for me, I'm going to keep mine very simple, clear. When we say conflict resolution, we have been so ambitious. We think we know the problem, we can solve it. So we go ahead and we create all these institutions. We think the problem, we know it, and we're going to solve the problem. So it's very ambitious a project, but the problem, like Dr. Hoffman put out, we never took the time to see the underline that created the problem, right? But the conflict transformation is to accept that we live in society where no matter what, we're going to have a conflict. But how do we use that conflict in positive way is a conflict transformation. We have to agree that no matter how we love each other, no matter what we share, we're always going to have differences. But how do we positivize that differences to make sure, like Reagan said, you can live in society without conflict? That, I think that's the dream we have, and that messed up everything. You cannot say, okay, this is a society where it's going to be always peaceful. As a matter of fact, the definition of the problem, right? So conflict is just a part of a human reality. Any relationship, from family-wise all the way to corporation, we're going to have a conflict. The international system is actually built on a conflict, right? You look at the countries, you look at the global system, everything is built. We have a group of people who support each other. We have a group of people who hate each other. That's the way the international system is made. So conflict transformation is a process by which we are aware of the fact that we're always going to have a conflict, but how do we positivize that conflict when it happens? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. John Mark. And now I'll go to Dr. Bell.
So I'm having a technical issue. Can you move on to Dr. Phelps, please? And I'll respond in just 1 second. I apologize.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Phelps.
To build on what everyone's been saying, there definitely are different views on studying conflict resolution and conflict transformation. But I think what's important to note is that's kind of impressive to see like how much our field is expanding on these things and how people are disputing, how to approach or how to define one of these processes. I definitely think conflict transformation recognizes that conflict is normal. It can start with things moving forward in a relationship, then things hit a wall, and then movement stops, and then you're kind of moving backwards, and then it collapses. But our conflict transformation really helps us address not only the episode, but also the epicenter of a conflict. And it sees conflict as this continuous dynamic and as like a normal thing. I teach conflict resolution here at Salisbury University. And I always tell my students that when you're studying conflict, whether it's transformation, management, resolution, it's really good job security, because conflict's like a condiment. It goes with everything and it's everywhere. So I hope that helps a little bit. Thanks, Anju.
Thank you, Dr. Fowles. I like that conflict is like a condiment, and without condiment, the food doesn't taste good. I know because I have a kitchen experience. Thank you so much. And I like what Dr. John Mark shared. He said that conflict is going to be there, but we have to use the same conflict for creating a positive change. Dr. Bell, is it okay? Are you available to answer the question?
Yes, sorry. I've been kind of having some internet issues. I apologize.
No issue. No issues.
It isn't always that great. So kind of to reiterate what some of my colleagues said and the other panelists have said, I think they're dead on 100%, and I agree. I think conflict transformation is about looking at the key roots of a conflict and trying to figure out where do we go from here and how do we address some of these key systemic issues that impact society or the impact the workplace. Where I think I feel like the term conflict resolution, I feel like is kind of something the here and now. And I think the idea of conflict transformation is something that's long-term, and it takes several actors, I think, particularly to look at conflict transformation, whether it be change of policies, whether change in people, as I think Dr. Hoffman said about the president. So I think, to me, in my opinion, I think it's looking at systemic issues and moving from there.
Thank you, Dr. Bell, and please stay with us because now I have some curated questions for everybody. So I'll start with you since I have you on the line with me. So a lot of time we have heard that identity plays a big role in escalating racial or intergroup conflicts. But I recently read an article of yours where you said identity can escalate as well as de-escalate conflicts. So how is that? Can you share some examples?
Definitely. So I think one of the key aspects of identity, I think we have to kind of unpack this term identity before we talk about identity conflicts. Where do we get the sense of identity that we all hold? And we get it from our environment. We all share collective identities to the groups that we belong to. For instance, I identify as being a Black man. So racially, I share that collective identity with other Black people around the world, and people of African diaspora, people of African descent who are actually on the African continent, but also in the United States. I would like to think that, being a Black American, I have a particular unique view of the world and a particular culture as it relates to my particular group. Where it often comes in when it relates to identity-based conflicts, I think there's a notion where we think that people just hate each other because of their different identity, and that's not the case. One of the key aspects when we look at identity conflict is usually connected to resources and power. I don't know how familiar some of you are with the conflicts in the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s. There were some journalists and some pundits who said, hey, what we just see is this kind of spilling over of ancient ethnic hatreds in Bosnia and Kosovo and other parts as the former Yugoslavia broke up. But other scholars, including myself, would disagree with that. I don't think what happened here in the 1990s in the former Yugoslavia and Bosnia also was due to ancient ethnic hatreds. Historically, that's not true. What it is due to is this kind of continued quest or trifling for power and resources. So I would say we should be careful when we look at any conflict in the world and say, well, this is an identity-based conflict, and see that it's not necessarily based on identity, while there is this kind of sense of identity that we all are connected to, and the narratives that we possess from a certain identity can foster conflict, sure, but oftentimes identity conflicts are based on resources and power. So the idea, I think, looking at de-escalation is we can also use identity as a key driver of a collective memory that brings people together. And in the article that you mentioned, I talk about the European Union. I think the European Union is a great idea when we talk about identity, decreasing conflict. If you look at several wars throughout Europe before the creation of the European Union, since the creation of the European Union, we've seen peace throughout Europe. Old enemies who once battled are now sharing the same currency, sharing similar passports, sharing similar customs regulations, whatever the case might be. So I think this is another idea where people rally together around being European. People rally together around the notion idea of what the European Union stands for. And I think this is where we see this idea of identity coming together to bring people together collectively, that may de-escalate conflict. One other example, I think, that when you think about identity, I think maybe we can go back to 9/11, and I remember 9/11 and the kind of sense of overwhelming, how do you say, connection that I think Americans had with one another, regardless of racial background or culture. People were kind of united in this sense behind this American identity emerging from 9/11 for a while. So I think this is another key example where people kind of can rally together behind symbols, beliefs, and ideas that kind of create this collective identity that may reduce social and ethnic fissures, for instance.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. It was really insightful, and I really appreciate how you said that identity comes from the environment, and it's high time that we shift the narrative. We have, focused on our limited identities, and we have to look beyond. Like you mentioned that 9/11, when the American identity took precedence over our ethnic and racial identities. Thank you so much. Now, my next question is to Dr. Brittany Fowles. And because we spoke about conflict and violence, so let us move to nonviolence, because she's the scholar in Gandhian and nonviolence philosophy. And I would like to ask Dr. Fowles, what is and how effective are the nonviolent resistance methods used in conflict resolution and management, especially in current times when the society has become so intolerant, and you can see some kind of hate crimes against a particular community?
Thanks, Andrew. I was still thinking about Jared's question, but there's great power in nonviolence, and this power of nonviolence can be seen from various activists. We often look to Mahatma Gandhi or MLK. I personally work with Dr. Arun Gandhi, who is Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, who lives out in Rochester, New York, at the Bosman Center for Conflict Resolution here in Salisbury, Maryland. And his granddaughter, Kasturi, works with me as well on a lot of research. So it's very nice too. I've studied nonviolence resistance and nonviolence theory, but it's also nice to learn from the Gandhi family as well. They're definitely the true experts on this. So we often look to these various activists for inspiration or how to address a certain conflict. And Mahatma Gandhi actually, he started off terming his approach to a conflict as passive resistance, actually. And he found out at the time that it was a term that was very too narrowly construed. He kind of saw it as a weapon of the weak. He saw how it could be characterized by hatred, how it could manifest itself as violence. It was pretty clear at the time that he had to come up with a new way to define the Indian struggle for independence. And he came up with his own approach to I would call it a typology of nonviolence. We have other ones such as non-resistance. We have passive resistance, selective non-violence, nonviolent direct action, nonviolent revolution. There's other ones, I can't remember them all right now. But what's important to get out of all of this is that with the Gandhi legacy, it needs to be respected for having an influence on studying resistance regimes around the world. Gandhi grew up under South Africa's apartheid, and there were enduring attacks from European African youths for not being white, and then also from Native Americans for not being Black. And this was a really important time in India's struggle to free itself from British rule. We also have MLK and his letter from Birmingham jail, which can also be seen as the same sentiment in that nonviolence can almost dramatize the issue that can no longer be ignored. So just kind of like addressing it in a way that, not only are you having nonviolence, but you're also kind of taking direct action with it as well. And, the power of nonviolence is seen, through MLK and Arun Gandhi and, in many other case examples in our history books. This nonviolent approach has been developing since about 1945 in various parts of the world, including Hong Kong, Germany. We've seen it with the Holocaust, the US, India, and England. And this nonviolent approach is definitely rooted in ethical and religious nonviolence or higher moral development. and does not require a charismatic leader or a change in human nature or a social revolution. Nonviolence is also a struggle that historically has been used by just simple, ordinary people who are actually capable of going about extraordinary action. As the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Arun Gandhi, he says, you can be the change that you want to see in the world. A lot of people credit actually that quote to his grandfather. His grandfather actually stated, be the change. And Arun ended up expanding upon it and say, you can be the change that you want to see in the world. And, he's just taking that philosophy that anybody can really go about and make change, no matter who you are. And what we've learned from the history of nonviolence resistance and from the Gandhi family and MLK and other people is that when we're addressing nonviolent resistance, it really needs to be coupled with direct action. Because direct action is really about, it's not just about changing our attitudes and our values, but it can also really help change policies. And I think, I think that's all that I wanted to mention about it. Over at the Bosserman Center, we practice, the Gandhian philosophy, and it's really embedded within a teaching hospital model as well. The teaching hospital model is just basically, not only are we studying the big theorists of the field, but we're also practicing, what we're studying as well. And, making sure that, what we are studying is efficient and right. So I think that's all I had to say. Thanks, Anju.
Thank you, Dr. Fouts, and that was really wonderful. And the key takeaway for me was that you just don't have to be passive when you talk about nonviolence. It's not an escape route. You have to take direct action also. So thank you for sharing that understanding. And now I will move on to Dr. John Mark. And the question for you, Dr. John Mark, is how to manage the element of uncertainty as it relates to a particular conflict resolution technique applied to a particular context.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say Dr. Jared Bell, the example he gave about European Union is very, very good examples. Before 1945, we know how Europe worked. Germany and France cannot get alone at all until we create the community, and then we are where we are right now. European Union is one of the continent region that I study. To my question, I look at that question every time I woke up in the morning. I was like, okay, uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is actually one of the challenges, and my colleagues will agree with me about conflict transformation or conflict resolution, because in my experience, for example, if I give you the example of Mali, every time a group of actors get on table, negotiate a kind of agreement on a specific case, what we're going to see tomorrow is maybe the multiplicity of that group. Another group emerge and demand other things. So I'm talking about perception here, and I'm talking about information, and I'm talking about actions, right? So all that come from the uncertainty where when you're negotiating, you want to make sure that you all are coming from the same place. If you don't have that information, then like I was using Mali's conflict, which I study every single day, we go to a round table, we brought all these mediators, we make a decision, and tomorrow what you're going to see is different group is born with different demand. Right? I hope my colleague will agree with me on that one. I feel like Jared have a question or something you want to add quickly.
No, please go ahead. Sorry, no, I don't have anything. I'm just adjusting volume. Please go ahead.
Okay, so as I was saying, I can cite three different uncertainty in conflict. Even the fact that even to define what a conflict is difficult, the information you have from all the parties that are dealing with conflict is important. The action you decide to take is important, and also the perception of the solution you brought on the table is important, because if you don't know, the perception can change. Like I was saying, back in 1960s, 1970s, first Nile River conflict broke between Egypt and Sudan, right? And we thought we have a solution to that problem, and then Ethiopia showed up as another party to the problem, right? And the same thing is related to what I'm saying in Mali. A different global group are growing up different days, and you end up asking yourself questions: do we actually understand what we're dealing with? So the uncertainty is going to be there. The invitation I always extend to people is that to make sure that, as a matter of fact, you know the information you need to know. You make sure that the action you decided is accepted by everybody, and then the perception of your decision is the same thing. I always give an example when I'm in classroom, either in Europe or in America, that when you go to West Africa, for example, if somebody say, in French, you say, je suis disponible, right? I'm available to talk to you. That person is not necessarily saying, I agree with you. No, he's saying, we can continue the conversation. So you want to understand this will lead to even the perception, like I said earlier, the perception of a conflict, or the language you're speaking around the negotiation table, and how the understanding is applied to every single element and member of the round table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. John Mark. And that was really very inspiring that you talked about understanding and perceiving the conflict, perception of your environment. That is really important in every walk of the life, whether it's conflict resolution or anything. So yeah, a lot of time this uncertainty can be met by reading your environment and understanding what people are talking about. Thank you so much. My last question is for Dr. Hoffman. And before I start the question, I would just like to say one thing that we have to see this conflict as a social change, as a vehicle for social change. And it's not that those who are experts or the community leaders, even only they have to utilize these skills which are shared. We all can share. We all can use these skills in our daily lives in improving our conflicts with our friends, with our co-workers, everybody. So we need to develop some kind of emotional skills or behavioral skills. So Dr. Hoffman is expert in the area of conflict competencies. So I just wanted to know from Dr. Hoffman how to develop these competencies so that we can manage conflicts very well.
Well, thank you, Anju, for another challenging question. And let me start with the definition of competency. So, to be competent at something for me means to have some kind of skill set where you can achieve, something that you're trying to do. So if I wanted to be a competent cook, for example, it would mean that I know how to select the right ingredients and how to have knife skills, and I can know how the spices work. And so then through practice I become competent at creating tasty food that people enjoy to eat. So what would conflict competency mean then? So for me, again, this is simply the way I view it, but to be conflict competent means we have a way. When we're helping someone else in a conflict, or we ourselves are in a conflict, we have to have a way, first of all, of understanding it. So there has to be some kind of analysis type of skills where how do we make sense of this conflict? What's going on here? Why is this happening? So conflict competency involves analysis, but then it also involves some intervention type of skills. So from my analysis of the conflict, then, do I have the ability to figure out the right course of action to take, or the right intervention to try to fix the situation? And so maybe that means, what we talked about earlier, like negotiation is the most appropriate thing to do. Or maybe it means looking at the policies as the right thing to do, from a conflict transformation kind of approach. So conflict competency is having the skills and ability to analyze a conflict, and then to choose and implement the best intervention for the situation. And we often say that each case is unique, and you have to understand the dynamics of each case, and the dynamics are changing almost minute by minute, day by day, month by month. So it makes it very challenging. So these conflict resolution skills are really life skills, in the sense that we've talked earlier this morning about conflict is inevitable. That notion has come up so many times. So really there's something to be said from one perspective for how come we don't have conflict resolution skills and peace education for every elementary school student. And so for each of us, we have the opportunity to practice applying our conflict resolution skills each and every day. And when we do this, when we're in some kind of altercation with another driver, or we're in some altercation in the grocery store, if we can model the conflict resolution skills or in these behaviors with our family, our in-laws, really what we're doing is, through social learning theory, we're modeling this and teaching other people, hey, here's a different way how to handle this conflict. And in that way, we're really creating these ripples of peace, exponentially throughout the world. And we're also doing what Dr. Fouts mentioned, in that we are being the change we wish to see, and we're modeling that and demonstrating that. So we walk the walk and we talk the talk, in other words. So how then does one become conflict competent? Where do we learn to analyze these conflicts and stuff like that? Well, there are multiple different training options, from short, 40-hour introduction to conflict resolution and mediation training programs you can take, or we know that there's bachelor degrees and master degrees and doctoral degrees. But one thing about training, no matter where it is, to really become competent, we have to be cautious about having a one-off training for the 40 hours and thinking like that's enough for everybody to become experts. And after 40 hours, see you later, you're all going to be experts at resolving conflict. So we have to kind of, not only are conflict resolution skills life skills, but we need to be continually practicing them and refining them. And we're on a journey to becoming professionals. And a professional is someone who's an expert at their skill. So we know, like, say in the martial arts, there's different ranks, there's yellow belt and black belt, and we don't really have that in our field. The cooking field has that, right? Different types of cooks and different ranks and stuff like that. So maybe good or bad, I don't know, but I see it as that we're all on this journey to becoming kind of professionals. And there's a quote from Bob Dylan where he says, we never really arrive, we're always just constantly becoming. So we're constantly in a state of evolving and bettering ourselves and fine-tuning our skills and trying to do better next time than what we did last time. And so, some of the ways we can do that is partially through reflective practice. So I take some action and then I say, what did I do right this time? What could I improve upon in the future? So it involves a certain amount of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, a willingness to kind of be critical of my own, did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? And all of this is part of this journey to becoming a conflict resolution professional. So it's really this merging of the passion for what you do, a knowledge about conflict resolution, the skill set, and working on building that skill set and applying that skill set. And really then at the end of the day, the journey, it's about the journey of getting there, and it's not about the destination. And so even myself, who has been doing this kind of work for close to 20 years now, I, as long as I keep an open mind and I'm curious and I want to learn more and read more, and it's like I never reach an end point where I say that's enough. It's a lifelong journey of continuous learning and practicing and applying my skills.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. And I really liked what you suggested, that it's a journey and it's not a destination, and we have to be reflective in our approach. We have to see what worked well and what did not. And we have to constantly model it for others to see what you say. I mean, you have to walk the talk. But I also like the fact that where you mentioned it's like not like a 48-hour training. I wish something was like that, like where you just take 48-hour training and it's like a laundry machine where you come out clean and you change. So thank you so much. Now I have one question from Ajab Khan, and he's asking how religion and nationality can affect peace and violence in the world? So whosoever wants to answer this question, please go ahead.
I'll take a stab at it since I talked about identity initially. I think there's great room, especially within the context of religion, and we see this often. There's ecumenical councils or interfaith organizations that operate here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have an interfaith council that works on building peace among Jews, Muslims, Christians, Orthodox, and Catholics here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that's one of the organizations that USAID works closely with our Pro Future platform, for instance. So I think religion can find, I think if we study at the heart of many, whether it be Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, there are elements of peace at the core of many of these religions. So I think it's there. I think if we look for that common humanity that we all hold, and we see that regardless of our religious background, or even I would say nationality, I think there is this kind of, obviously there's this commonality that we all share that we can kind of draw upon, right? And I think, despite some of the negative things that we've seen with happening in Israel or Palestine over the last several weeks, we have seen some organizations come forward that are Jews and Muslims coming forward to discuss issues of peace. So again, I wouldn't say religion is always a toxic element for conflict. Another side, when we look about the idea of nationality, I think one way we can think of nationality in a way that is that decreases conflict is nationalities that are inclusive. The one thing that I hear is, as I travel throughout the world or in my work, despite many of our social and ethnic issues on race in the United States, the one thing is that anyone can become an American, and anyone can kind of buy into this American aesthetic or idea. So I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, I have friends who were born in India and who are Muslims who celebrate the 4th of July, for instance. So I think there is this great room for nationality to be inclusive if we want it to be, if we want to include everyone in various national identities. And of course, I understand it's not that simple. So one, for instance, another example of this, so anyone who follows the situation in Bosnia, here in Bosnia, there are 3 predominant ethnic groups: Muslims, Croats, and Orthodox Serbs. And so one of the key issues, that there's always issues relating to political power in the country that have stemmed since the war, since the end of the war in 1995. One of the key aspects that some have advocated for, hey, let's get rid of this notion of different ethnicities, and let's focus on a civic identity which all Bosnians can kind of buy into. And those of you who may have studied the Rwandan context can understand that, hey, this idea of ethnicity has been banned, right? In Rwanda, it's illegal to refer in a government setting or in a public setting, refer to yourself as a Hutu or Tutsi, right? And so now this notion where people come together as Rwandans under this national identity as being as a Rwandan. And so this context is something that people are discussing more and more here in Bosnia, as it fits, hey, let's move from these ethnicities to more of a centralized national identity based on the commonality of being Bosnians and shared history and food and culture, right?
If you don't mind, Angel, I want to pick back on what Dr. Bell just said. Yeah,
sure. Please go ahead.
I love his example of Rwanda, but what we need to understand about Rwanda conflict back in 1994, the concept of ethnic group that was created by European was choosing to create a situation where it become us versus them, right? So that's where the situation started from. Then we European literally create this situation to divide the country that was unified. And we use that identity and we fought and we killed people and we tell people that they're different from others. So in Rwanda, perfectly in Burundi, they choose a type of person because of a physical appearance. And that's what we use, right? And I'm gonna go back to the religion and nationality. Go to Nigeria. go to Mali, go to Burkina Faso, go to Senegal, go to Togo, go to Ghana. What do you think is the base of the conflict? Religious belief. Muslim against Christian, right? Why is the question we ask. Nobody can attest that their God is the God we all know or we always should be adoring. But the problem is we use that as the reason to fight order. So my point is, I'm going to go back and say, yes, nationality, like Dr. Bell said, everybody will come to America, become American citizenship. The nationality doesn't matter. But nationality matters when we are trying to create a situation where it's us versus them. Religion is the same, right? My religion should not have any impact with the relationship I have with Dr. Fawz. Growing up, I was born in Marseille. Growing up, my friend, and Marseille, if you all know Marseille at all, is sitting on top of Morocco, and is a Maghrebian city, but even though it's a French city. My friend are growing up with all Muslim. As a kid, we don't know the difference. We love each other, we eat together, we play soccer. But as soon as we grow up, they put in our head, he's different because he has different God, right? So we need to pay attention that those are things, the system is a systematic creation to divide people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bell and Dr. John Mark. And I really appreciate what Dr. Bell suggested, that we have to create a common civic identity rather than our ethnic identities. And thank you, Dr. John Mark, for suggesting that, because it is always on the mind that on my mind also, that when we are kids, we are so innocent. We don't differentiate on the basis of color or any ethnic diversity. We don't even know those words. We just want to play and have fun. And that's what we all have to do. We have forgotten fun, and we have just divided the world into so many different pieces and into different categories. Dr. Fawz and Dr. Hoffman, would you like to add on to this debate on how the religion and, nationality affects?
One thing.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
So I just want to state my comments. I don't want to trivialize identity, because I often hear sometimes that people say, well, I want a colorless society. And that's not what I'm aiming for, because I don't. I'm very much proud to be of my ethnicity, my culture, etc. So I just want to I don't want to trivialize the idea of identity, like, hey, let's just get rid of this, stop looking at religion and identity, because those are important things in all of our societies. And that makes us who we are. And so the best way is to come forward and learn to coexist with each other based on those different identities. So I just wanted to clear that up. I'm not trivializing identity by saying, hey, let's just create a civic identity, and that's not what I mean. All of our identities are important because of ethnicity, race, whatever the case is. I don't want to create a colorblind society, because that's what makes society, as an American, that's what makes our society very rich. But we have to find ways to coexist and live, and this is where conflict transformation comes in. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bell, for sharing detailed insight into that. My bad, I took it that way, if you feel so. Okay, Dr. Hoffman was sharing something, I guess.
Yes, well, I just wanted to share a practical example from my own experience of how we worked with identity issues. So for 5 years, I was involved in a conflict prevention project in the small West African country of Guinea-Bissau. And it didn't take very long in Guinea-Bissau for us to learn that there were some very serious divides along ethnic and tribal lines that existed within the government. But not only were they within the government, but they were within the military. And we saw the military as being one of the key actors in the country that held so much power, because of course they held the means of conducting violence, they had weapons. So what we were concerned about this division within the military and how the military was aligning with certain political elements. And we said, what can we do as outsiders to try to, help reconcile these, ideological identity divisions about, this is the way people grew up, and this is, they're deeply embedded identity issues. And we really racked our brain around this, like what kind of interventions are possible. And one of the things that we began to do was we said, as soldiers, we can start to send some messaging that a professional modern soldier, is responsible they take the orders from the government. And, and that we're working with the military leadership to start, sending some of these kind of messages. And another thing we wanted to do is we tried to bring in actually former soldiers from the former Yugoslavia, because we wanted to have them fly them in as like guest speakers. And the idea was that they could provide an example. So again, this is kind of like demonstrating, and walking the walk. And they could say, look, we come from a situation where there was a lot of hatred and a lot of division, and we were able to reconcile and lay down our weapons and move forward. And if we can do that in our country, then surely it's possible here in Guinea-Bissau. So these were two of the ideas. Unfortunately, we had issues with flying folks in to do that presentation, but so that intervention didn't occur. So I don't know if it would have worked or not. It sounded like a good idea, but certainly the first idea of like really saying, professional soldiers, and we shared like a code of conduct for professional soldiers and stuff like that. And it was about overriding in a way the identity of the tribal and ethnic identity, and saying, here's the identity of what a soldier should do and how they should behave in a modern democratic society.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman, for sharing the code of conduct. I think I like the idea. Dr. Fouts, do you want to add anything on this question?
Yeah, I think I can add something. Hearing everybody talk about this, it really makes me think about a need for, this is another process, appreciative inquiry, but the need for an appreciative inquiry approach to a conflict involving like religion or something, because appreciative inquiry really helps us, appreciate one another. It's a strengths-based approach. And it helps you kind of like look towards the future, and you're looking in the future in a way, not just what you want to get out of the conflict, but what do we want to all get out of this conflict? And it helps you appreciate, one another as well. I think that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Dr. Fouts, for suggesting that we all need to appreciate. Yeah, I think as kids, we learned that. We appreciated everything. Now we have forgotten. Okay, so I have next question from Sri Lanka. From Satish, who's from Sri Lanka. The question is how conflict transformation works in the politicized ethnic division, and how ethnic harmony in a country can be built from this situation. Any thoughts? Anyone can chime in.
I mean, I could speak really just rather quickly from the Canadian example of someone here in Canada. Right now I'm studying Cameroon, for example, and there's a divide there around Anglophones and French-speaking Francophones, which is very fascinating because here I live in Canada, where a lot of our French-speaking population is in Quebec. And we have, this has been a point of contention for many years, and everyone thinks, oh, friendly Canadians and they're peaceful and all that. Well, I hate to say that we've had violence in the past. There were terrorism incidents in the 70s and so on and so forth. And that we got to the point in the 1990s where the French grievances, they became separatist, and they wanted to separate part of their province from the rest of our country. And there was a national referendum on this. And the problem is that would have torn the country into pieces, because our whole East Coast would be a separate. People said if Quebec separates, then our East Coast will want to separate. And if the East Coast separates, then the West is going to separate, and the whole country would disintegrate and maybe into 2 or 3 countries, which I'm sure was concerning for our American neighbors. So Canada has had this long ongoing process of how do we reconcile, these grievances or these perceived divisions between different people who speak different languages and have different cultural backgrounds and different upbringings. And so there are different mechanisms. So one is to have an official policy of multiculturalism in Canada. So we welcome, there are lots of diversity, and we say we're officially a multicultural country. So you can be a Canadian, but also have your identity as a a Hindu or a Jew or whatever that might be. Another thing we have is we have an official 2-language policy. So in Ottawa, the capital city, all of our websites and all of our documentation is in both French and English, and the street signs. And my panelists will know there are other countries where, that's that's created conflicts, the street sign language and stuff like that. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that there are other countries that also struggle with divisions along ethnic and cultural lines, and that there are certain actions that we can take to try to address those grievances, make everyone feel included, and try to create a peaceful society where these differences are maybe not even, there's a notion of tolerance, but it's more than tolerance. It's celebrate all of these different cultures and celebrate their food and their language, and so I'll just leave it at that.
So
Andrew, can I jump into this one?
Sure.
What I took out of the question, and that I remember when I see the question, is that how conflict transformation works in the politicized ethnic division. So that is the key. We politicize the ethnic group itself is not a problem. It's because we use it as a tool of politics to divide people. That's why it becomes a problem. So the solution is simple. Can we depoliticize ethnic group? Right? If you look at most African countries, and I'm sorry to keep giving the example for African country, the country are divided between North and South. That's what the colonizers did. They have divided the country between North and South and used one side against another. That's the same thing for ethnic groups. I gave the case of Burundi, the case of Rwanda. You go to Nigeria, it's the same thing. You go to Mali, it's the same thing. Ethnic group is not a natural problem for people who live in the same country, because we have used it as a political. The only solution to that is to depolitize the ethnic group. People are people, and we should be able to live together. But as long as we find a way to politicize this group, right, as I said in the beginning, is us versus them, then there's no solution.
So I think that's an excellent point, and I would like to chime in on that. And one of the key issues, I think, and not to go into the Bosniak context, so you have ethno-nationalist rhetoric that still stems from the 1995 war that's being spewed into the public sphere on a daily basis. Not only that is, Bosnia is still a society that's transitioning in many ways, but also dealing with post-conflict justice. So there's still wounds from the war that you pick up the newspaper or you read daily reports, or we get briefings in the embassy. And so some of the key issues are around transitional justice, around war crimes. So these are still aspects that are still very politicized around ethnicity. And so one of the key ways that USAID Bosnia has worked and is to create platform, and other international actors and some domestic organizations here, is to create a platform to bring people together to depoliticize ethnicity and to talk about commonality. So another way of putting it is dialogue. I mean, I think dialogue is an excellent way to bring people together across these different ethnicities, religions, etc., to kind of see the commonality. And here in Bosnia, you're going to find more people who are dissatisfied with the political elites, regardless of ethnicity, right? So whenever you actually start deconstructing and talk about some of the issues that impact everyone's life around the country, whether it be this entity of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina or the Republika Srpska, wherever it is in the country, more citizens are coming together and starting to realize and having discussions that, hey, we share this commonality. We're unhappy with our political elites and our current political system, regardless of what they're promising. And just to give another short example, a few years ago, I participated in conversations around the assassination of Martin Luther King in Baltimore. I used to live in Baltimore, and the conversations were amazing. They brought people together from different parts of Baltimore, and they talked about issues of race, even people who were neighbors. And they talked about the change in Baltimore since the assassination of Martin Luther King and the change in race relations. And this was something that was very eye-opening for me. I just moved to Baltimore from Pittsburgh, so I didn't understand the entirety of the racial dynamics of the city. and what had stemmed from the assassination of Martin Luther King in 1995. So in 1968, 1995. So I thought that this is a fantastic way of bringing people together to depoliticize issues around race and to kind of see that not just commonality, but to kind of be able to understand each other's perspective. That, you know, to go back to what we talked about on identity, you know, we all have common identities that are informed from narratives from our environment. And unless we actually remove ourselves from that environment and have discussions to challenge those narratives, we're going to keep repeating those narratives again, and that's going to keep driving conflict. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. John Mark and Dr. Bell, for sharing that depoliticization of this ethnic issue is really needed. And we need to change our narratives, because whatever we are doing over and over again, we are going to get the same results which we have got. I have a question for Dr. John Mark, and Radio Privert from France is asking this question: what can be the solutions for Mali? The coup d'etat seem to be the rule now.
Thank you very much for that question. Mali is a country I study because of the country's history and the geographical location of a country in West Africa. I said this a year ago, I said this 10 years ago, I said this 20 years ago. The coup d'etat in Mali is not a Malian problem. The coup d'etat in Mali come from the outside of the Mali, people who have certain interests in the country, people who are making money selling the gun in Africa. I prefer to be killed than to tell the truth now. If France leave Mali right now, if America leave Mali right now, we will have a peace. The coup d'etat is just people who have a gun, who keep making money out of the gun, they keep forcing Malian military. What have happened last year was the most sad thing we have seen. And what have happened now, that the transition government is being taken to the military camp and the military people took over the power, is not a Malian problem. It's a European problem, it's an American problem, it's a world problem. If we want a peace in Mali, and Radio Privert, I'm going to repeat myself, we need European to get out the country, we need America to get out the country and leave the country and learn and teach. As a matter of fact, the only thing we can do for them is work along with them and teach them how to build their own country.
Thank you, Dr. John Mark. And I have another question from our previous question. It's a kind of, maybe we cannot call it a rebuttal, but another question which has stemmed from the same question related to religion. So Akin Kunmi Akinlabi is asking that panelists have discussed mostly about Abrahamic religions, and they want to look at the African religion also. It seems these religions hardly mention in religious conflict in Africa. So any of the panelists, would you like to answer this question in context to the African religions?
I think before I leave the floor to Dr. Jared Bell or Dr. Hoffman or Dr. Foz, that's a very, very good question. But the question goes back to the fact that if you, the entire time since 1990s, after I finished law school and studying in Africa, the problem has never as such as the local religions, right? The colonizations was introduced by the process of Christianized African people. And then the problem is that process leads to make a difference between local religion, which is local practice, which if you look at it, as a matter of fact, the Christian managed to build a community or ethnic group around that to fight the older people because of their practices. So the question is correct. We never talk about religion in terms of Bible or Quran, that we only talk about the religion in terms of Quran and Bible, but not the local religion, because somehow we do not see the presence of those local practices coming into conflict. It's only a Christian religion and a Muslim religion that have, as a matter of fact, I'm going to give the example of Boko Haram again. I'm going to give the example when you talk about Algeria, when you talk about Mali, when you talk about all the region, northern and Central Africa, is about Muslim versus Christian. Nobody ever say Christian versus Voodoo in West Africa or in North Africa.
Dr. Bell, would you like to add something to it?
So I can't speak on the context of local religion, so I'll save it for the experts. Thank you, though.
Thank you, Dr. John Mark. Anyone else? Okay, so I would like to share one more quote to end this beautiful discussion. And this is again from one of the former presidents, former US presidents, John F. Kennedy. Genuine peace, not merely peace in our time, but peace for all times. World peace, like community peace, does not require that each man love his neighbor. It requires only that they live together in mutual tolerance, submitting their disputes to a just and peaceful settlement. And I think that's what we all discussed here. We said that conflict is inevitable, but we have to grow out of it. Now, my last question to all of you is, what is that one action you want all of us to take as a result of this beautiful and brilliant conversation?
So if I could give one of the key factors, I think that I try to strive for. I definitely want to say thank you, Aju. You're an amazing moderator. You did an excellent job. I want to echo Brittany's statements. Excellent. And then thank you to my panelists. This was a very, very interesting discussion. And I even questioned some of the things that I've been thinking over the last several weeks around conflict. But I think one of the key things that I take away is to keep educating ourselves. And I would agree with Dr. Hoffman, is that one of the key factors is not just being agents of peace, but also just being a good human being and being a well-rounded human being. Keep educating yourselves and dig and ask questions. Don't settle for some, excuse me, language, a crappy explanation that you've read online. Dig deep, learn, grow. I mean, that's the only way that we can break our biases. And I say this from my own perspective. The only way we actually can break biases and reduce conflict, and at the end of the day, the only one that we can really be responsible for is ourselves. So on that note, that's my key takeaway, my key piece of advice. Keep growing, keep learning, keep challenging yourselves and thinking about how you think about the world and how you think about your neighbors and your friends and people who are different from you, regardless of race, gender, sexuality. So these are, I know we all come from different societies, so these are different aspects that we grapple with differently. And again, based on our identities, based on what's safe in our society, based on what's okay. But keep learning, keep growing, keep unpacking why you think the way you think. And I think you will come out pleasantly surprised at how much growth you'll see in yourself.
I'm going to have to agree with Dr. Bell to say that yes, the discussion is, I feel like we can have this every Saturday for the next 3 years to unpack all these problems, because everything we're saying here today, as a matter of fact, if my colleague agree, we just on the surface, we have not go down yet, right? So the problem is, if there's something I want to suggest from here today, is that, like Dr. Bell said, we need to start looking onward ourselves, right? How do we behave? That's where the peace starts. For example, people in my neighborhood ask me why everybody wants to talk to you. Because I'm not walking around looking for somebody that I'm going to say hate me. No, that's not who I am, right? Dr. Foss can testify to this. In our campuses, yes, I don't know enemy. I don't know race. I'm not saying race doesn't exist. What I'm saying is, for me, human being is a human being. So the first thing we need to start doing is that we need to start telling ourselves, human being is a human being and nobody is after you. That's a good beginning. And let's join 360 Peace Initiative, and let's work together and change our community. Thank you.
Dr. Fouts, Dr. Hoffman, please share your takeaways.
It's pretty hard to top what's already been said. I mean, I have to fully agree with what's already been said. But I mean, if I could just leave you with something short and simple, probably 3 or 4 words, I'd say, be curious and keep talking. And if you leave today's session with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to talk and dialogue, I will be happy. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think, I love everything that this organization embodies. I love, having sessions like this and learning from one another. And, after every discussion that was going on today, after somebody would start speaking, then I would start thinking about myself and, my experiences with working with the United Nations and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And I definitely have learned that just being open to everything and learning from other people all the time, I even do it with my students all the time, it comes out being so beneficial for myself and then for others. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, all of the wonderful panelists. And I agree with Dr. John Mark, who said join Peace 360. So it's my sincere appeal and request to everybody, please join Peace 360. And that's all what our wonderful panelists have shared. And Dr. John Mark serves on the board of Peace 360. Dr. Fouts and Dr. Bell, they are on our advisory council. And Dr. Hoffman is our regular guest speaker. So if you want to hear them more, please join Peace 360. And now I thank every one of you. And now I'm passing on the baton to our executive director at Peace 360, Patricia Williams. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anju. First of all, I want to thank our wonderful team of panelists who took the time from their busy schedules to share their valuable advice and their experience on our topic of the art of conflict transformation. In addition, I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And I hope that you all actually enjoyed our discussion. We look forward to more such discussions. Peace 360 actually has that we actually have lined up for you. If you would be interested in learning more about these events or more about Peace 360 initiative, please feel free to leave your email in the chat box so that we can have that information and reach out to you. Otherwise, please visit our Facebook page for more special events, as well as additional information about the organization and how you can become involved. Thank you so much.